Welcome to the Strong Life Coach podcast. We speak life, coach life, write life, and lead life. Today we have a very special guest, one of my closest friends, probably my newest closest friend. If you think about the last year and a half, the memories we have together, I don't know if you know this, but the way I talk about you when you're not in the room is I call you the alpha of the alpha males that are in my life. I mean, this guy, if you don't know him, I mean, you could tell, I mean, he's a man of great stature already. But then he's a hunter. He's a fisherman. He's ex-Army, Air Force, Jiu-Jitsu. Was that kickboxing?
Yep.
So he's a bad dude. When I say bad dude, I mean a good dude to have on your side.
Correct.
So but I think what I've appreciated over the last year and a half that we've been connected is the friendship, the bond. Whether we were working on the lawnmower in your garage, or we were going out camping at Canyon Lake, or we were fishing. You helped me catch my first fish, so that was special and meaningful. I know I probably never seen somebody more excited for somebody else when that fish came up out of the water.
Yeah,
and it's probably one of my favorite memories of my lifetime. But Kyle, welcome to the show, Kiel Carter.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me, brother. Whatever I can do to help.
Oh yes, sir. Now. How's your day going so far?
So far, so good. Got up this morning, went to work, take care of business there, take care of the family, get off, come over here and support you.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
I appreciate that. Now, when I think about you, I think about, like, as I alluded to earlier, you think about you are the poster person for masculinity, right? So we just go down your profile. It's very easy to see. What does it mean for you to be that example as far as what masculinity looks like?
It's important for me because, first of all, I need to portray that to the family.
Mm-hmm.
I need to portray that to myself. And, as an African American today, you need to portray that to others. It's just not going to be something to where you can just look at one day and get up in the morning and say, well, this is what I need to be. I was raised this way, thank God for my mother and my father.
Mm-hmm.
And it's put a certain aspect of learning, coaching, and teaching in my life as far as how to stand up tall, hold your head up,
Sure.
Look people eye to eye when you speak to them. And it's not a macho thing. It's just, recognizing who you are.
Mm-hmm.
What you can and what you can't do, and always being able to be honest with yourself,
Right.
in everyday walk of life. So
Yes, sir.
masculinity it means so much more than just standing there with your chest poked out.
Right.
It has to do with all facets of life, especially when you have kids.
Mm-hmm.
When you're a family man, you need to be able to project that to the family. And, you have sons, you have daughters, children.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be able to portray that and make sure that they understand where it's coming from.
Yes, sir. No, I'm with you. And one of the things I admire about you is it's not just the high adrenaline activities that you've been about, mm-hmm. but even being able to walk with you and seeing the kind of father you are to your kids.
Yes, that's important to me.
And I mean, it wasn't just, it's not just, hey, let me focus on Kyle's hobbies and Kyle's activities, but I've seen you, coach your daughter.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen you, bond with them while camping.
Yes.
And I've just seen you prioritize investing quality time. I know my wife was showing me a video, I guess, that your wife put up on Facebook on when y'all two were doing little boxing drills.
Oh, yes.
And so I think you have this, not just the adrenaline rushing, the jumping out of the helicopters, motorcycle riding that you have
Yeah.
in your background.
Yeah.
But then you have also this fatherhood and this example that you show.
Yeah, it's important to, again, when you have children, I've got a 3, 10, and a 22-year-old,
Mm-hmm.
And my 3-year-old, of course, he's, too young to really be involved in anything as yet, but I've already got plans for him.
Uh-oh.
And my 10-year-old, my daughter, I teach her now. It's important to me to teach her, how to defend herself.
Mm-hmm.
Just for in all walks of life, whether it be academically, whether it be physically, we kind of get away from that, and the kids are raising themselves nowadays with video games and TV and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just important to show, different aspects of life. My oldest son, he's in the Air Force now.
Mm-hmm.
He's in Okinawa. Love him to death. We were brought up. I taught him the same thing. It's important to learn how to defend yourself. Mentally, physically, all aspects of life. So that's what I'm about. I believe in taking care of myself physically.
Clearly, right?
Yeah,
you're right.
Yeah, you know what I mean. I pride myself in being that way. You know what I mean. I'm getting older now. I can still do the things I used to. It just takes longer to recover.
Right.
You know what I mean. But it's important to teach those things. Show your kids something different.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir.
I'm with it, and I appreciate your example. Even you mentioned in the African American community, but even I think in general, I think you're just a stellar example, and I just admire the kind of father you are, and of course the man that you are. To me, it's always impressive. Whenever I find I feel like every time I hang out with you, I find out something new to admire. I'm like, okay, we're hanging out on your back deck, and hold on, wait, Kyle built this?
Oh yeah,
and,
I take a lot of pride in doing things. Like I said, I teach my kids the same thing. My 3-year-old, it's a 3-year-old. I mean, what I mean? I'm not going to have him out there with a tape measure and a marking pen, doing stuff. But my 10-year-old, my daughter and my oldest son, I've kind of showed them to where, be self-reliant and not have to rely on too many people for too many things. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like I've told you before in our friendship, in the time that we've known each other and, my growth spiritually because of you, which I thank you for. It kind of goes hand in hand. It was like we joked before, and I told you, on this spiritual journey, you're who I want on my side, but in that back alley, I'm who you want. You know what I mean? Yeah, you can count on that one.
That's a classic.
Yes.
Yeah, that is a classic.
Yeah.
If we ever write a book together, we gotta put that in the title or something.
Of course, yeah. You know what I mean? Spiritual journey in the back alley.
Here we go. Yes. My brother Kiel Carter with us today.
Yes, sir.
Exciting. Now, and I'm glad we can laugh about things like that. And I know today we're gonna cover what some people would call some sensitive material. I know you and I we have that common background in that, and we've lost our dad. Our dad has passed away, and we want to have great discussion today about what that's meant for us, and then hopefully that for people who are going through it now or who've been through it in the past, or people who even will go through it, they're able to glean a few principles that we share and use that to be able to help it be easier for them. Because I don't know about you, and not that anybody didn't want to help. I think in some ways, a lot of people in my life hadn't been through what I've been through.
Yes.
And they probably just didn't know how to help. But I want to be somebody that the experiences that I've been through, even the pain I've been through, and the heartache I've been through, how can I not let that go to waste? Instead, how can I use that to help other people that are going to go through this? It could be a traumatic event.
Correct. And like my father, when he passed away and all, it was devastating to the whole family. My father passed away from dementia, Alzheimer's, and it's a debilitating disease. You watch him wilt away to nothing. You know what I mean? And getting off from work and stopping by mom's house, that was a priority for me. Giving her a break. People like to talk about all the time the experience they have with the person that's actually suffering, but the very few think about the actual caregiver also. So getting by my mom's house and give her an hour or two, go to the mall, mom just get out of the house. My parents were married 55 years.
Wow.
Before my
That
dad passed away. Yes.
Time.
And I thank God for that, for having both of them there. It's just one of those things where you sit back and you think about it, and at times you take things for granted. It goes back to the old saying, you don't miss your water until your well runs dry. You know what I mean? So, it's just different things on many different facets where you have to look and you look back and you wonder why this and why that. But ultimately you have to come to the conclusion you weren't in control from the beginning.
Right.
So, if you believe in, Scripture, you believe in what God has stored for you, that his way is the only way. So,
Mm-hmm.
while it will cause doubt and will cause anger, you just have to trust in what you believe.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And when you think about, I think about 55 years.
Yes.
55 years. And I know you just celebrated the 12th.
Me and my wife just celebrated our 12th anniversary
Come on,
this past
baby.
weekend.
Come on,
You
give
know
me
what I
a
mean?
fist
Yes.
bump on
Yes.
that. Yes, sir.
It's man, it hasn't always been smooth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, but you have children. You took that oath. And no matter what, you always have to try and figure out a way to get past those rough times and
Sure.
do what you need to do, because it's just not about yourself anymore.
Mm-hmm.
When I was single, it might have been a different aspect of
Mm-hmm.
just a girlfriend or something else. But
Sure.
you get married, you take it to a different level, and
That's right.
when you have children, they didn't ask to be here.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And you see too many in the minority culture, single parent.
Mm-hmm.
And coming from my mom and dad, they've had their rough times too.
Sure.
But it was always refreshing to me to know that when I got home, my father would be there. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a life lesson taught early.
Absolutely. Now, we do want to, well, one, I think it's powerful that your 12 years of marriage is an extension of his legacy.
Yes.
And that's something that stays, that there's no way around 55 years. 55 years is 55 years.
55 is a long time, brother.
It's a long time.
Yeah, my 12 seems like 55, but it's not.
Right.
Right.
So it's amazing seeing his legacy lived out in you,
Yes.
in that space, in that commitment and devotion to the marriage. Now, I do want us to jump into a little bit of true and false when it comes to in relation to your dad, and part of it even with his passing. So, true or false? I see a lot of my dad in me.
That would be true.
Okay. Tell me how.
In the physical aspect of it, I can remember when I was a kid, my dad was the type where he didn't too much force anything on you, but he would leave good hints. Like he would bring home bodybuilding magazines and stuff like that, and just I'd get home and there'd be one on my bed, and it was never a note attached to it that said you must read it, I can remember this one in particular book. It was a book on Leroy Colbert, which was the first black man with 21-inch arms. So
right.
I remember reading that 2 or 3 times, and him asking me questions about it. Do you like it? This, that, the other. What do you think about it? And this, that, the other. So that stuff has never changed from me. And as my dad got older, and he slowed down a little bit, all that weightlifting and stuff went out the window. You know what I mean? But he was already older. He retired. General Dynamics. He was in aviation. I'm in aviation.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, unfortunately, he retired at 55 with the pension. We'll never see those days in today's time. You know what I mean? But still, the legacy is there, continued on with. And I don't want for anything. I thank God every morning when I get up and open up my eyes. There's a couple times that I've heard him tell me that too. You know what I mean? You get up, you breathe fresh air, you open your eyes. The rest of the day is what you make of it. You know what I mean? So, I see a lot of myself and my dad and myself. Just the physical aspect. My dad was shorter in stature than I am, but he was just as physical early on until he got to a point where that didn't matter too much anymore. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. And similarly, I see when I think about my dad, it's interesting because when I grow my beard out a little bit more, I'll get a glance in the mirror, and then I'll think I've seen him, but then I'll see me.
Yeah. And
then, or sometimes when people describe the way he was, or my memories of the way he was, the way he would laugh and laugh deep and have a great time and be completely fine being the center of attention. Right?
Yes.
Of course, in my business, it's motivational speaking.
Yeah.
And it's one of those rare professions where you are the center of attention. So
yes.
I'm even asking about my life's calling, which I believe that's what my life's calling is.
Right.
If that's part of my dad living in me. And I see that him, which was more about, in the party scene and having a good time with the family and never being shy in any situation.
Correct.
And then I see that in me where Oh yeah, speaking in public is just fine, and I enjoy the preparation that goes behind the scenes, but then I also enjoy the performance that goes in front
Correct.
of everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. And you remember that stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. All right, true or false? My dad's passing has had a big influence on my relationships today.
That's a two-part for me. That's true and false. Um, true, because I had no idea that me and you would end up meeting, in the church like we did, and
Mm-hmm.
sharing common bonds as far as both of our fathers,
Mm-hmm.
being like that, and being able to relate. While I don't know how you feel in the passing of your father, it's the situation that shares a commonality.
Sure.
Just like you wouldn't know inside how I would feel, but it's the commonality of the situation where we both went through. Regardless how the situation was, my father retired when he was 55. He passed away when he was 76. So he lived 21 good years up until the day he left here. And with your father, being a little bit younger, and you being younger also, while the circumstances is different, the commonality is the same. Both of us are without a father. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So in that aspect, that's true. And then the next aspect, as far as being false, that's kind of one of those where if I dwell on it too much, you know what I mean? You still have your life to live. You still have to go on. You still have to move forward. You still have to push forward. And that's all, as a parent, that they would want you to continue on with life, There's other people out there who might take it differently and respond to it differently. My thing is, if I can help those people that are in those situations, any way that I could help them, I first would like to tell them it's not my situation that shares the same as yours. It's just the commonality of it, And for advice and everything else, would try and give it. But to actually say it's changed me to where I miss him. You know what I mean? But I find myself, it goes to how you were raised also, because I'm able to put the bad memory of him suffering like he did for the last 6 months of his life, put that out of my head and remember the 45 and a half good years, you know what I mean?
Right.
And that takes over anything bad,
Yes.
you know what I mean? So,
yes.
Right.
I'm similar. I think I have yes in that the way it's influenced my relationships is I've made it a topic that because it's part of me, and like his passing isn't like an independent incident in my life that it doesn't touch anything.
Yes.
But it affects the way I feel around different seasons.
Yes.
There's something about around Father's Day that I feel a little heavier.
Yeah.
There's certain, like he passed in February. I feel a little heavier in February. During our birthdays are 7 days apart. So mine's right on September 6th. So his is always on September 13th. And that time period, I know I feel a little bit heavier, and I notice that I'm a little bit off. And so because my relationships are connected with me, then I think they feel that as well. But then there's another element where the pain of losing him, I don't think it touches certain relationships at the same time. To your point. Yeah. But no, I'm with you. Now, the third true or false question we have is, anger and sadness were elevated in my life when my dad passed away.
Yeah, that's true. Anger being, if there's anybody that's listening whose parent, mother or father may have passed due to a similar circumstances, dementia or Alzheimer's, that it's a debilitating disease. It took my father's eyesight from him. He was on home hospice. My mom wouldn't let him go to a hospital. So I used to come over to the house, just about every day after work, and I'd walk in the door and my dad would be laying in the bed, and I'd say, "Hey, Pop, how you doing, man?" And he'd try to sit up. He was so weak he couldn't. He'd try to sit up, and he recognized my voice. You know, he could hear me. You know, but it took his eyesight from him. You know, so that the anger was, in reflecting back, you look at it, you know, and you find yourself questioning, you know, God, why are you letting?
Yes. Oh yes.
Why are you letting, you know, this happen, or this so long? You know, my father, when he passed away, he lived. He couldn't drink or eat anymore. You know, he forgot how to swallow. So he basically, for 17 days, with no food or no water.
Wow.
You know, lay in the bed until he passed away. You know, and I'd come over and he'd be moaning and pain. And, you know, my mom would give him the proper medication to try and ease the pain, and so he could, you know, go ahead and go. And, you know, the anger that you feel when you sit there, and the anger is not based on why you think God is letting this happen. The anger is, for me, I could do nothing. You know, we've been to the gym before. I can go in there and put up some weight. Okay, I can do some things in that weight room. You know what I mean? Right. And here I am, you know, physically and mentally all there, and spiritually, you know, trying to be there, and I can do nothing. So that was my anger, you know. And then once my father, you know, finally did pass away, the sadness set in, to where you almost go back on your word, and you're like, I wish he, even if he was suffering, I wish he was still here. You know, but you come to the realization that, you know, my dad was catatonic, so his body was there, but he was already gone. Right. You know, so, you know, it varies in circumstance from person to person. Some people, you know, live with this dementia, this Alzheimer's, and it doesn't take as long. Some people, my dad suffered for, I'd say, the better part of 4 to 6 months. Wow. You know, so that anger and then the sadness kick in all at one time. Right. You know, my dad early on in his life was in the Navy. So, you know, when my mom called me and the coroner did get there, you know, we made my mom go stand outside. And they came in because I didn't want her to see my dad being put in that plastic bag, you know. So they came in, and my dad left out of the house with the American flag on him, you know. So while it's a sad thing, it's something to be proud about at the same time, you know. And then you have that also, you have that feeling of joy because you're not sitting there watching your dad just suffer like that, you know. So it's a whole myriad of feelings, you know what I mean?
Right, no doubt. Yep. And it's powerful. I think about your dad, I think about you, and I think about Kwon, you know, your oldest son.
Yes.
And it's a powerful thing, even thinking about his legacy from a military, serving our country. I'm grateful for your family, you know, really being in service to our country. And I relate with the anger with my dad's passing. And it came in unique ways for me as I began to pinpoint it, because sometimes you hear about, you know, a healing that takes place, or somebody had a disease or a situation, but it was like this dramatic turn of events where then they got healing. So in my anger, I'm almost it is this, in this talk with God or thought with God, it's like, where's my healing for my family? Where is so my dad passed under, not because of health, and there was of course when I was 17 I was told that he shot himself, and then 5 years later I was told that it might not have been suicide, it might be homicide. So you get these two horrible situations, but for me the anger came from, well, God, you've intervened many other times to help other people. Why did you intervene to help my family? Correct. And to help him. Yeah. And so there's this anger that way. And I've even found in my situation, because my mom and dad divorced when I was 2. And I even found there was some anger directed back toward him. Yes. And conversations we can never even have about manhood and about not being there consistently, you know. And I know you and I talked about even your consistency, which I admire with my situation. I never want to dishonor my dad's memory, but I also want to be authentic and real about his example.
Yes.
And his example wasn't that his example was not, I'm gonna consistently be there for my children. It was very sporadic. Is some birthdays, some weekends, some holidays, and whenever else he kind of felt like it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a raw thought. And again, I don't want to dishonor his memory, but it was some anger I've had to deal with even as an adult, navigating what my real thoughts were about my childhood. And now it's not even something I can even express to him, because he was here. So it's just, I've had to deal with this anger in these new ways.
Yeah, it like I said, every circumstance is different as far as the way that you handle the tragedy, of any loss of a family member, especially a mother or father, the situations vary. That's why sometimes you hear somebody, they lose a mom or a dad, and they're like, oh, I'm so sorry, I feel so bad for you, and in the back of your mind you're like, have you lost your mom or dad yet? And why they might not think about it consciously of what they're saying when they're only trying to be remorseful to the situation. That's why when people talk to me about it, I have friends that, like yourself, me and you've talked on many occasions where I've always said, while I don't know how you feel, I understand the situation because I lost my father or mother or such and such, So I had my own bitterness to deal with in my life concerning my father and his passing, in the way that he passed. You know what I mean? Just the suffering. The bitterness was not so much faced towards God, because the bitterness was just in the question of why. You know what I mean? So you can find yourself asking those questions constantly, and you can drive yourself crazy asking those, because you're not going to get an answer.
Right.
You know what I mean? So time heals everything, man.
Right. And even in the element of sadness, one of the things I realized that while nobody told me this, I don't know if anybody was prepared to tell me this, that my highest moments or my greatest achievements would also be some of my saddest moments.
Yeah.
And it was just weird, like the fancy phrase is dichotomy or experience, because I'm like, okay, I have this achievement in my life. It might have been high school graduation, college graduation, or sports achievements, or getting married, or buying a house. And these are supposed to be some of the most incredible experiences of a lifetime. Yeah. But I'm finding myself not on a high, but there's some darkness with my my brightest times.
Correct.
And there's some lowness with my highest times.
Yes.
And so, but nobody had told me that life was going to be that way. Yeah. And I'm going to be missing him. And not only am I going to miss, like, I wish he can see me, but I also wish I can see him as he sees me. Yeah. And what does his eyes look like when I see his pride in me? And so that's just a sadness I just wasn't fully prepared for.
Yeah, the smile on his face watching his son, Yeah, I understand. Yep.
Awesome. Let's transition to talk about some fill in the blanks.
Okay.
So we'll go, when a friend just loses their dad, I say.
Like we talked about before, while I don't know how you feel, I understand the situation because I lost my father in this way. If there's anything I can do to help you, you know what I mean? If you want to talk about anything, let me know. Some of the things I don't try and do is give people advice on how they should handle their own individual grieving. You know what I mean? What you don't want to drive anybody to, take anything the wrong way. Sure. You know what I mean? A loss, a family member, a loss of a mother and father, I wasn't raised by them, so I can't tell them how they should react. So I just, I offer my assistance in helping them by letting them know what happened to me in my situation. And if they can take any kind of solace or comfort from my situation and relate it to what is going through their mind at the time when they have lost their family member or their loved one, then, it's a win-win. I haven't directly told them, well, you need to do this. You got a lot of people out there who feel like they need to know your business or do your business better than you, and that, just personally, that's the way I would handle it.
And I appreciate your perspective on it. And mine is similar. It's I let people know that mourning is good, and it's okay. Not that them passing is good, is good, but to mourn is normal.
Yes,
it's right. It's appropriate, and I've just been in different settings along the way. Again, with my loss, where people have expressed to other people saying, "Oh, well, so and so wouldn't want you to cry," and I kind of like, well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's accurate.
Yeah,
and or I even heard this phrase. I remember, I think it was actually one of the services for my dad, and they were like, "Be strong for grandma," which there's part of me that gets, but it's like, I just lost my dad.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
Strength is not even on my radar.
Yes.
What does that even mean? Does that mean to pretend I'm not hurting for grandma?
Yeah.
Or to do what? To not cry? I don't know in that setting what that would even actually look like.
Yeah.
But as you know me, I'm not big on being inauthentic.
Some people, they go off on their little soliloquy and tell you, well, you have to be strong for this, you have to be strong for that. But at the same time, in the back of your mind was like, okay, who's going to be strong for me right now? Because I'm not. That's your father laying there, in the same way with me and with my dad, I heard that, you got to be strong for your mother. But one thing that helped me out before my dad passed away, when he was still able-bodied, kind of, move around, I remember him and my mom, they came back from the doctor one day, and my dad's kidneys were shutting down on him. Oof. So he called me in the living room. He said, I want you to do me a favor, boy. My dad's would always say, hey, boy, come here. You know what I mean? And I said, yeah, Pop, what's going on? And he says, you got to promise me you take care of your mother. You know what I mean? And when you have somebody tell you that, especially your mom or dad, no matter which way it went, it hits home to you, the severity of the situation. But by him saying that to me while he was still able-bodied, helped me when he did pass away, because I had already made that promise to him. Some people don't get to do that.
Right.
You know what I mean? So everybody's situation is different. You know what I mean? So that helped me when it come time to people tell me, well, you got to be strong for mom and this, that, and the other. I said, well, I already have been, and that's what I've been doing. Where you've been, where have you been, rather? You know what I mean? So, like I said, every situation is different. It's the task that's at hand is up to you to conquer.
Sure. The next one I have for us is, one way my dad inspired me the most is
to slow down. He used to always tell me, my nickname when I was younger was Scooter.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I was over here, I was over there, you know what I mean? Being single, man. I mean, he'd tell me, boy, you need to slow down. The faster you go, the harder it hurts when you fall. You know what I mean? So, as you get older in life, and I'm 46 now, so it's not like I'm 70 or something, but I'm not 20 anymore either.
Right.
So when you get older in life, what people tell you previously kind of takes effect. And I can remember my dad telling me that more than anything. You need to slow down, just take it easy. My dad was, he kind of moved real slow anyway. He was going to get there when he got there, you know what I mean? And, I take after my mom. My mom's real high strung. She's running for everything. If she goes to get something out of the refrigerator, she's in a full sprint. So I adopted that from my mom. But I remember my dad telling me more than anything, slow down.
Slow down.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, and for me, I remember, I think enjoyments. I think I don't know if he ever told me to, but it was the way I continued to see him.
Mm-hmm.
It was, and maybe it was because, and I've talked to my mom about this. I've talked to several people about it. But the experience we had together was, if we were gonna be with him, we were gonna be doing something.
Yeah.
You know, we weren't gonna be doing nothing. Like, so, well, right. He's only saw us sporadically, like, and it wasn't consistent. But when we actually had time, it was a great time.
Yeah.
You know, we did a variety of activities, whether it was throwing darts outside, or playing basketball on the mini hoop, or playing basketball on the real hoop, or throwing a football.
Yeah.
Or going to the horse races, or flying a kite, or riding bikes.
Yeah.
There was, if we were together, then there was action.
Correct.
And it was never boring with him. So
Yeah.
so I think it reminds me, yes, hustle, grind, and do well, and excel. And I only remember, I think, 2 serious conversations with my dad my entire life, because he was so playful.
You're right.
And
right.
One of the conversations I remember, I was in middle school, and he told me that I think I got like a C or something in the class, and then he told me, like, I don't want to see another one of these, and which, again, I've always seen him as playful.
Yeah.
I've always seen him as having a good time. Like, wait, what? Like, I haven't seen this version of you.
Mm-hmm.
But I look back and I appreciate that kind of conversation, because it was like a call into excellence.
Yes.
So it's kind of like both sides of that enjoyment, but then also be excellent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, good. I do want to hear, what would you say is your favorite memory of your dad?
Favorite memory of my dad is born and raised in San Diego, so in the city, you know what I mean? But my parents are from, the East Coast. My dad, job took us out to California, born and raised there all my life, And one of the fondest memories I remember is when we went fishing. This lake in Southern California called Otay Lake, real popular for black bass.
Mm-hmm.
That's where my fishing and hunting and stuff side of me came from, is from my dad.
Mm-hmm.
And we were on a boat out in the lake fishing, and I had a buddy of mine with me, and we weren't catching anything. And so my dad was like, "Hey, we're gonna go over near that dam," and it was buoyed off, so you weren't supposed to be over there. But we had heard there were some monsters over there, so we pulled the boat up in the bushes and kind of hid it, and walked across to the other side. And oh my goodness, man, there were some 6-7 pounders in there just swimming around.
Okay.
And we were throwing everything at them fish. But as the times that we went fishing, and I've taught you a few things about it. If you can see them, they can see you.
Right.
And like I said, my dad moved slow. You know what I mean? And we thought we heard the game warden coming. My dad took off and left me and my buddy. We were trying to keep up with my dad, and I was 10, 11 years old, man, and I couldn't even catch my own dad, man. And I was like, oh my goodness, I got Carl Lewis as my dad and don't even know it. You know what I mean? And we were spilling tackle all over the place and everything else, and we'd get back to the boat and take the bushes and branches off of it, and come to find out it was somebody else coming over there to do the same thing. So we had a big laugh about that. My dad was like, he used it as a coaching lesson. He said, "See, always remember, boy, when you're doing something you shouldn't be doing, don't do it." He was giving me advice on something that was his idea. You know what I mean? I was like, "Man, what are you talking about, Pop? You told us to go. You were driving the boat." You know what I mean? But we laugh about that. Even still till today, myself, my mom, we talk about that. That's probably one of the most funniest moments I can remember with me and my father.
Yeah, one of mine, which it's somebody told me this when it came to loss, whether it was a loss of a relationship or a loss of somebody who's who's died, and they told me, they said, have you ever thought about the senses that you experienced when you were with them? And that kind of hit me, and so I remember, like, when my dad would hug me, that from his fresh shave from his beard, I would get a scratch
Yeah.
on my face, and or when the way he would smell in the morning was he would smell like coffee
Mm-hmm.
because he used that coffee in the morning, or the way he'd smell in the evening he smelled like beer because
Right.
he often had a beer in his hand,
Right.
and I have like these those memories. Well, they might not be like this one favorite one, but there's something about like I remember what he smelled like. I remember what he felt like.
Yeah.
And to me, that's something I cherish as memories
Yeah.
from my dad.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you always will.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, for you, what would you say has been, what was the most surprising part of dealing with his passing?
Even like I said, when he was at that point where he was no longer, his body was here, but he was no longer here.
Mm-hmm.
One of the most surprising parts was when he was still alive, and you went over there and you can sit there and look at a person and tell, okay, this is it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You're like, you talk about it. Hey, your dad's got 2 months. He's got a week. He's got 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
But when it happens, it still catches you off guard.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's surprising when I call the house and I talk to my mom and I can't say, hey, put dad on the phone,
Mm-hmm.
or hear my dad answer the phone.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it's happened, it's still a shock to the system.
Right.
You know what I mean? And, you never get over it. You just get used to it not
Mm-hmm.
being there. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But you'll never get over it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been a surprise over the actual finality of death.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not used to it, or you're not ready for it, or even if you are ready for it, you think you are, until it happens.
Mm-hmm.
It is what it is. It's done.
It's hard to prepare for, even if
Yes.
you see it coming.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And for me, it's almost metaphysical, but it's what's surprising to me about dreaming about him.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you've dreamt about your dad, but for me, my dreams about my dad, it's a fascinating place to be, like, mentally, because in my dreams, when he's alive,
Yeah.
and in my dreams, I don't know, like, my mind like blocks that part out, that I don't know he's died. Like,
Yeah.
I don't even know that he's died in real life, and so in my dream he's alive, but also in my dream, like, when I hug him or embrace him, I will feel like the sadness. I will feel sadness, and in my dream I'm kind of confused. Like, why am I so down right now
Right.
when I'm hugging this guy?
Yeah.
But then when I wake up and I realize it all, so there's this weird. And I say it's odd because I haven't heard a whole lot of other people talk about it, but it's an experience that it was surprising to me. I wasn't ready that there's this element of him living
Yeah.
in my dreams.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
And for you, what would you say was the hardest part? What was the most difficult part in dealing with his passing?
Your dad's gone. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean? The person that you've known, all your life, and all the good times that you shared. You know what I mean? Pat throwing the football and the fishing, and everything else that we did together. The riding dirt bikes. I myself, brothers and sisters, we were never really for want on anything.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? My dad had a good job. We worked and supported the family. You know what I mean? Mom was there. Discipline-wise was definitely there. You know what I mean? It's just what's hard is what's hard with anybody when they lose a loved one or a family member.
Mm-hmm.
They're gone.
Mm-hmm.
And what makes it easier for me is I concentrate on all the good times that we had.
Right.
And I have found, for me, again, everybody's situation is different. The more times I think about everything that was good, I don't remember anything that was bad.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Even seeing him laying there wilt away to 82 pounds.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
While I have a vision of that, my thoughts always go back to what we were doing when he was alive, all the good times, the conversations. took him, big diehard Philadelphia Eagle fan.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Coming up, my dad was, so I grew up with the Eagles, and I'm still with the Eagles now.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And I took him to the Eagles Dallas game in the new stadium.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and seeing a smile on his face then, you know what I mean? He had just started to experience the weakness, and so he was still able to walk from where we parked and go up to the game and watch the game. You know what I mean? So that kind of stuff means a lot to me, because, you know, when you think about all of the things, you know, coming up as kids, the food you put on the table, the clothes you put on their back, and everything else, you know, if you are good inside and you realize what you need to give back to your parents
Mm-hmm.
to help them once they get to that
Mm-hmm.
certain age,
Mm-hmm.
giving back means more than anything. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to give back financially. And
Sure.
if it happens to be that, then you do what you got to do.
Sure.
Within reason. If you can help,
Mm-hmm.
then you do it,
Mhm.
you know.
Right.
But my thing was always making sure that, you know, my mom and dad, if I had the money to take a trip, my parents were coming with me.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Take my dad to a football game. You know, we go fishing, this and that and the other. My dad, he never liked to get up early. But every time we went fishing, I'd always pick him up about 3 in the morning, because we want to be on the water at first light.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd pull up, and the door would be open, and he'd have the cooler, the tackle box, fishing poles, and everything.
All right.
You know what I mean? When it comes time to that kind of stuff, you know, that and bingo. Man, my mom and dad loved to play bingo.
Okay.
You know, my dad could be sitting around all day, and my mom said, "George, let's go to bingo." Out the door he went, brother. You know what I mean? But, you know, it's things like that. I don't dwell in the bad.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I keep myself uplifted by dwelling in what was good,
Yes,
what was
sir.
positive in
Love this. Love
my
it.
life. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? That was my father.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So I try to be the same for my kids.
Mm-hmm.
You know, anybody can be a dad. I try to be a father to my children.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? That means loving them, discipline, showing them right from wrong, and letting them know that you're there for them. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And that's what I got from my dad. So that's how I portray myself to my kids.
Sure. And there's power in choosing to think about what is lovely, choosing to think
Yes.
about what is excellent. Even I shared a little while ago about my dad and him not being there, but that's not. I don't center my thoughts there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. Okay, well, you know, you weren't there enough, or you weren't a great father figure. You know, like my thoughts aren't centered there. But it's a lot of what you said of centering my thoughts on the beautiful experiences we have,
Yes.
and give my time to those if I want to reflect, and really it's one of those keys to having joy and peace in my life.
Yes.
Because we can, as you and I have discussed, you know, we can have that burden of bitterness.
Yep.
And being upset, frustrated, and ultimately could, as we've also talked about, like the idea of like blocking the blessing.
Yes.
It could get in the way there. I would say the hardest thing for me, because my dad passed under tragic circumstances, talking about him was incredibly difficult. Not because I didn't want to, but because almost anybody I talked to about it in my family, they would be crying. And I didn't understand as a young guy that mourning was good.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't understand that mourning was appropriate. And I didn't understand that people were willing to mourn with me.
Yeah.
And I remember one of my friends, Robin, I think she was like the one person in my life who would consistently ask, like, how are you doing with your dad's passing? And
Yeah.
and she's like, whatever, 5 foot nothing. It's not like she's tall or but it was just somebody who cared enough to ask that hard question. And my approach was, if you care enough to ask the hard question, I'll care enough to answer your question.
Yeah.
And so it was hard for us to talk about in my family, but I found that other people around me, it was something I could talk about, even, you know, us doing this now, and me referring back to what I've went through, it has been incredibly therapeutic.
Yes.
And helpful for I think healing to take place in my life with his passing.
Yeah.
Now, as we talked about earlier, you mentioned you being a dad now.
Mm-hmm.
And what does it mean to you to be a great dad, and really to extend the legacy of your father and him being a great dad, extending his legacy as a dad to your kids?
More than ever, or more so than any, what it means is preparing them for life.
Mm-hmm.
If you've done what you're supposed to do as a father, family man, husband, dad, whatever you want to call it,
Mm-hmm.
you will have prepared your kids for life.
Mm-hmm.
And you can raise them up as best as you know how, and there are still instances where you've done the best you could and kids stray.
Mm-hmm.
You try to implement the discipline early, because if you wait too late, you're lost. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I try to make sure, for one, that I tell my kids I love them daily.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Even after, if there's a scenario of discipline,
Mm-hmm.
even after that,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I love you.
Mm-hmm.
I probably say it more than anything. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It means a lot to me to show my kids that, so when they grow up and my daughter gets married or my son gets married, they understand the value of how to treat the opposite
Mm-hmm.
in a way that they would want to be treated themselves, because
Sure.
they receive that treatment from home.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
That's powerful. That is powerful right there.
Yes.
Keep going. Go ahead.
yeah, you want the best for your kids. And the only way that you're going to give them the best for your kids is be the best for your kids.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care about being the best for my boss. I don't care about being the best for the next door neighbor, but being or trying to be the best for my children mean everything.
Mm-hmm.
And there's situations where, we talked about it before. There's situations where maybe it didn't work out, and the dad's somewhere and the mom's another place and she's got the kids. But for all the fathers out there, distance is no excuse
Mm-hmm.
to not have a relationship with your children.
Mm-hmm.
Period, point blank, in the story.
True.
And I know that for a fact because my oldest, was with someone else. And we talked about it before. I would talk to him on the phone every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday.
That's consistency, baby.
Period.
Mm-hmm.
He was in another state and I was here. And every summer I would fly, go pick him up, bring him back for the summer, spend the summer with him, take him back, and then fly back myself.
Mm-hmm.
That was every summer.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was some alternating as far as holidays were concerned.
Mm.
I never let distance be an excuse of why my son didn't know who his father was
Mm-hmm.
in his life.
Mm-hmm.
Period. That's a coward's way out to me,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how I was raised. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Me and my son, we have the best relationship now, just like it was back then.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Showed him love. He come here. I bought him his first motorcycle.
Mm.
Dirt bike. He has all those memories of everything, to where he needs to see that just because you might not be around the corner, you're right next to me
Mm-hmm.
in heart.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And that it means more than anything to me for the kids, because like I said before, they did not ask to be here.
Mm-hmm.
And you see on TV and unfortunately in a minority culture, it's real easy for the man to go,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not easy to stay and take care of his kids.
Right.
You know what I mean? And too many of us nowadays take the easy way out.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, it's not been the 12 years that I've been married, me and my wife, it's never been a smooth slate.
Mm-hmm.
There's been some rocks in that
Sure.
road.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
As with anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I always draw back on is I'll always picture my kids being raised by somebody else.
Mm.
And I'm like, whatever the argument was it worth it that much?
Mm-hmm.
Especially having an older one and been through that.
Right.
I was never married before this. I've only been married once, but
Mm-hmm.
that it happened like that.
Sure.
And even in then, as a single person, distance it's no excuse.
Mm-hmm.
Period. You know, how
Mm-hmm.
many young brothers and young girls do we see today without that father figure,
Mm-hmm.
where we could say, you know what, if there had been a father figure in that young man's life, maybe that road that he's traveling down, he would
Mm-hmm.
have took the other exit.
I tell you what.
You know what I'm saying?
Tell you what. I remember I was sitting in a room and I was volunteering in a prison,
Mm-hmm.
men's prison there, and we're talking about fatherhood. Again, not that I'm a father, but and here's the interesting principle. There's an incredible amount of life principles that can be shared. I mean, being truthful is a regular principle for anybody,
Yeah.
but it's also for or being there for your friend. Or being there for someone. It's the same principle as being there for
Yeah.
your child. But it was wild. It was the vast. It was, if not every single person in the room, it was almost every single person in the room. Father was not involved.
Yeah.
And you just think, where did this start?
Yeah.
And as your point went, how could the life been different?
Yeah.
If the father was involved.
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
So there's some deep truths to that concept there.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, I know we want to bring this in for a landing here. Do you want to give any final words of input or advice to anybody who's listening to us, whether that's about being a father or even if that's about being a son, or anything else that you want to give as your closing thoughts?
Closing thoughts. The piece of advice that I would give on two counts. Count one being as far as dealing with a tragedy. You know, be careful of who you pick to help deal with your grieving.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people have a lot of advice
Mm-hmm.
who aren't going through what you're going through. A lot of people just want to help, you know, and sometimes while the help is good, you know, the healing process takes place when that light goes off and you're laying in bed.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? You know, if you feel like you need to reach out, you reach out to folks, but, you know, too much advice can be bad.
Mm-hmm.
You know, too many people willing to give their own opinion of how you should do this and how you should do that. And unfortunately, in today's society, you know, any wrong or right thing could be taken adversely in any direction. You
Right.
know, if you're dealing with that grief, you know, seek help, but seek the right help.
That's right.
You know,
That's right.
just don't seek help just for saying, or just to say that you've had a shoulder to cry on.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes that shoulder you're crying on doesn't always have the best intentions for what you need.
That's right.
You know.
Mm-hmm.
And second, as far as, you know, being a father to your children, I wish more minority fathers out there,
Mm-hmm.
you know, maybe today if they hear us talking, can go back and reestablish that relationship with their son or daughter.
Come on.
Don't let it fester over, because once it gets past a certain point, it's too late then. You know,
Mm-hmm.
That child, he or she did not ask to be here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, go back and establish that relationship, man. You know, you never know at what point when you go back, how close was he or she to falling off that cliff and you not even realizing it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just be in their life, positive way. You know, you can't tell your children that you shouldn't be doing this or you shouldn't be doing that.
Right.
And at the same time, you're doing what you're telling them not to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So let advice come from self that you're actually trying to follow and mimic what you're telling them.
Mm-hmm.
This is how you should go, because if you don't, you know, in all actuality, it's just being a dad, being a father.
Mm-hmm.
You know, be a father to your kids. Don't just be a dad.
That's right.
You know what I mean? Being
Mm-hmm.
a father, being a dad is, you know, oh yeah, I brought, you know, I got them something for their birthday, or, you know, this or that and the other.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I mean, my kids call me dad and I'm fine, but I'm in that house.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And I don't expect my children to run around, oh, Father,
Mm-hmm,
you know what I mean?
mm-hmm,
But it's just the difference of the word and what it means.
mm-hmm.
There's too many dads out there. You know, we as minority fathers need to be fathers to our children.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Love it. I love it. Doing what you can, starting right now. Again, some to your point, if they have done a shoddy job up until now and it hasn't been great, all right, what can you do right now?
Yes.
What can you do in this season? Because you could be crippled all day long from what you didn't do, what you haven't done, but what opportunities do you have right now to jump in there, to invest, to love, to encourage, to cultivate, to nourish a relationship, and you never know what could blossom.
Yes.
And you may not be able to pick up the child on your shoulders anymore.
Yeah.
And that's one only for a season.
Yep.
But there's so much we could do in a variety of other seasons in our relationships. Yeah. So if they're adults, then the relationship's gonna look different. You're not gonna be providing discipline.
Yeah.
But then you could still cultivate and nourish a relationship despite what's happened in the past. If the child is willing.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. Yep.
Love it. Well, big thank you for joining the show. Always appreciate the conversations with you.
No problem, brother.
And love you.
Yeah,
and,
love you too, boy.
And I'm excited that they're going to be able to enjoy this.